"You'll apologize to my brother or leave my house," my wife ordered at dinner. So, I rose from my seat, approached him, and uttered one phrase that annihilated 3 marriages, even including ours. Can you imagine spending 6 years feeling like a convenient ATM, constantly belittled by your in-laws, only to have your wife scream at you to apologize to her criminal brother? Instead of caving, I unleashed one sentence at a family dinner that made the room go stone silent. 20 minutes later, 3 marriages were shattered, mine included. Buckle up, because this isn't just a story. It's the seismic shift that rocked my entire world. This all went down last October, but it feels like yesterday. My name's David, I'm 38, and I'm an aerospace engineer. For years, I genuinely believed my marriage to Sarah was, well, not perfect, but solid enough. We had a nice home in Riverside, good jobs, and we were even starting to talk seriously about kids. From the outside, we probably looked like we had everything figured out, like we were building a life together. But what people see from the outside rarely matches the messy truth behind closed doors. And in our case, the biggest problem had a name: Brandon. Brandon, Sarah's older brother, was 42. He had that kind of slick, golden boy charm that made people assume he was successful before he even opened his mouth. Perfect hair, perfect teeth, a handshake that felt like he was closing a deal. He ran a real estate development company that his father-in-law, a very wealthy man, had essentially handed him on a silver platter. But Brandon loved to portray himself as a self-made titan, constantly spouting off about his vision and drive. The truth was, he'd married into money, into a family with country club memberships spanning generations and vacation homes in places normal people only dream of. From the very beginning of my relationship with Sarah, Brandon made it crystal clear he didn't think I was good enough. He never said it directly at first, just those little, insidious comments. "Death by 1,000 cuts, you know? Aerospace engineering, huh? That's steady work, I guess." Or, "Sarah, are you sure you don't want someone with a little more ambition? Someone who's really going places?" My personal favorite: "Must be nice having a government-adjacent job where you can just clock in and clock out. Some of us are out here actually building things." Always delivered with that smug, condescending smirk. That punchable smile. He'd always follow it up with a fake, "Just kidding, man," when he saw my politeness starting to fray into something darker. As the years went by, his comments got sharper, more public, more cutting. And Sarah? She never defended me. Not once. She'd just laugh it off. "That's just Brandon being Brandon. He doesn't mean anything by it. He's like that with everyone." Except, he wasn't like that with everyone. He wasn't like that with Michael, Emily's husband, who made partner at his law firm. He wasn't like that with any of the cousins in finance or medicine. He was only like that with me, the engineer who worked with his hands on complex problems, building things that actually matter, instead of just shuffling money around and calling it entrepreneurship. I should have seen the writing on the wall years ago. But I loved Sarah, or at least I thought I did. So I kept my mouth shut, kept my head down, and kept showing up to family events where I knew I'd be treated like the help. The dinner that finally blew everything up was supposed to be a celebration. Sarah's parents, Robert and Susan, were renewing their vows after 40 years of marriage. 40 years. That's a lifetime of partnership, of compromise, of building something together. They'd rented a fancy caterer, decorated beautifully, the whole production. All 14 of us were there: Emily and Michael, Brandon and Jessica, aunts, uncles, cousins. All of us dressed up, all pretending to be one big, happy family with absolutely no dysfunction lurking beneath the surface. I knew it was going to be a rough night the moment Brandon pulled up in his brand new Tesla, immediately launching into how he'd paid cash for it. "Couldn't even fit all the cash in the briefcase," he boasted, with a theatrical laugh. "Had to use 2 bags. But when you close a deal like I just closed, you treat yourself, right? You know how it is." He looked right at me. "You know how it is." Like I would ever know what it's like to pay cash for a luxury car because I closed some shady real estate deal. I just smiled and nodded. 6 years of "don't rock the boat, don't make a scene, don't embarrass Sarah, keep the peace." That was always the mantra, wasn't it? Swallow your pride. Don't cause drama. But 6 years of keeping the peace had gotten me exactly nowhere except to a dinner table where I was being publicly humiliated, while my wife studied her plate like it contained the secrets of the universe. Dinner started pleasantly enough. Susan had outdone herself. White roses, candles, soft music. Robert gave a touching speech about 40 years of marriage, about partnership and choosing to love someone even on the hard days. It was genuinely beautiful. For about 20 minutes, everything was picture perfect. Then came the main course, and with it, Brandon's compulsive need to be the center of attention. "So, David," Brandon said, loudly enough for the whole table to hear, cutting into his filet mignon like he was performing surgery. "Still working on those. What do you call them?" "Rocket parts." I felt that familiar tightening in my chest. "Here we go again." "Satellite components," I corrected calmly, keeping my voice even. "For communication satellites, the kind that let people make phone calls and access the internet in remote areas." Right, Brandon waved his fork dismissively. "Sounds thrilling. Really cutting-edge stuff. How's the pay treating you these days?" "Still in the low six figures." The table went silent. You could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Everyone knew exactly where this was going. They'd seen Brandon do this before. At Christmas, at birthdays, at 4th of July barbecues. And nobody ever said anything. They just let it happen. "I do fine," I said simply, not taking the bait. "Fine," Brandon repeated, letting the word hang in the air like it was something distasteful. "That's exactly what I'm talking about, Sarah. Don't you ever want more than fine? Don't you want great? Exceptional? Don't you want a husband who can give you the life you deserve?" Sarah shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. She was studying her asparagus like it held the secrets of the universe. Brandon, his wife, Jessica, said quietly, reaching for his arm. "Maybe we should talk about something else. This is your parents' celebration." No, I'm just saying," Brandon continued, warming to his subject like an actor who'd finally found the spotlight. "Look at what I've been able to provide for Jessica. The house in the hills with the pool and the view, the cars, the vacations to Europe twice a year. That's what a man should be able to give his wife. Not just fine. Not just adequate. Not just getting by." I felt my jaw tightening, but kept my voice level. "Different people value different things, Brandon. Not everyone measures success by the size of their house or the badge on their car." "Of course not," Brandon said, with that condescending smile that made me want to reach across the table and wipe it off. "Some people measure it by the size of their ambition. Or, in your case, the lack of it." Brandon, Robert, Sarah's father, finally spoke up. His voice had an edge I'd never heard before. "That's enough. This is supposed to be a celebration." "Dad, I'm just being honest," Brandon said, holding up his hands in mock innocence. "Someone has to tell him the truth. David's a nice guy, sure, I've never said otherwise, but nice guys finish last. Sarah deserves someone who's going to really take care of her. Someone who's actually going somewhere in life, not someone who's content to just coast along in a middling career, waiting for his pension to kick in." Middling. That word hit me like a physical punch. I'd worked my entire adult life to get where I was. For years of undergraduate engineering, working part-time because my parents couldn't afford it all. 3 years of grad school, living on ramen and hope. Countless 60-hour weeks trying to prove myself in a field where one mistake could literally cost millions. I held patents, 3 of them. My work was orbiting the Earth right now, helping people communicate across continents. Last year, a satellite I designed key components for helped coordinate disaster relief after a typhoon. Real people, real impact, real work that mattered. And this trust fund baby, who'd never earned anything on his own, who'd been handed everything by his rich father-in-law, was calling my career middling. Something shifted inside me. Something that had been building for 6 years finally reached its breaking point. "You know what, Brandon?" I said, setting down my fork carefully beside my plate. "I think you've made your point very clear." "Have I, though?" Brandon leaned back, enjoying himself immensely. The whole table was watching now. Forks frozen midair, napkins clutched in nervous hands. "Because from where I'm sitting, you don't seem to be getting it. My sister could have married anyone. She's beautiful, smart, successful in her own right. And she chose you. Someone who's just fine. Just adequate. Just middling. Brandon, stop it, Sarah said. But her voice was weak, uncertain. She sounded more embarrassed than angry. And she wasn't looking at her brother. She was looking at me, like I was the one causing a scene. I'm just saying what everyone's thinking, sis, Brandon continued. At family gatherings, when we talk about what everyone's up to, we talk about my latest development project. Michael just made partner at his law firm. Even the cousins are doing interesting things. And then we get to David and it's like, yeah, he's still doing that satellite thing. Nothing new, nothing exciting. Just the same old fine. I looked at my wife. I looked right at her, waiting for her to defend me, to tell her brother he was out of line, to remind him that I was her husband and deserved basic respect. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her eyes dropped to her plate. That's when I knew. That's when I finally understood what I'd been refusing to see for years. I'd lost her somewhere along the way. Maybe I'd never really had her, and I'd been too busy working, too busy trying to be enough to notice. Actually, Brandon, I said, standing up slowly from my chair. I think there's something everyone at this table should know. The room went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Brandon's smirk widened. He was practically glowing, anticipating the scene I was about to make. Poor David finally lost it. He'd say for years to come. I walked around the table toward him, slowly, deliberately. Everyone's eyes followed me. The reason you've been able to close all those big development deals, I said, stopping right next to his chair and looking down at him, is because your father-in-law has been funneling money from his pension fund investments into your projects. Brandon's face went white, like someone had pulled a plug and drained all the blood right out of him. Jessica's glass slipped from her fingers, hitting the table, red wine spreading across the white tablecloth like blood. That's a lie, Brandon sputtered, but his voice cracked. He sounded like a scared kid, not the confident businessman he pretended to be. It's not, I said simply. Your development company is technically profitable on paper, but only because you're getting loans at rates that don't exist in the real market. Loans backed by pension fund money that's supposed to be in secure investments for retirees, not propping up your commercial real estate venture. I've been documenting it for months, actually, trying to decide what to do about it. Whether to report it. Whether to tell Sarah first. But I think you just made that decision for me. Robert stood up so fast his chair nearly fell over. Is this true, Brandon? Is what he's saying true? Jessica was staring at her husband with pure horror. Brandon, tell me it's not true. Tell me my father isn't involved in this. Tell me right now. Who cares how I get the money? Brandon sputtered, his composure completely cracking now. The developments are successful. Everyone makes money in the end. It's just creative financing. That's all. Business people do it all the time. Except the retirees who are counting on that pension fund being there when they need it, I said. Except the people whose life savings are being used as your personal bank. Except the teachers and firefighters and nurses who put their money away for 30 years, thinking it would be safe. And now it's funding your Tesla and your house in the hills. Sarah grabbed my arm, hard enough to leave marks. David, what are you doing? What I should have done months ago, I said, looking at her, really looking at her for maybe the first time in years. Telling the truth. Your brother's been calling me a failure for 6 years, calling my career middling, mocking everything I've worked for. And the whole time, he's been committing fraud. And you? You've been letting him tear me down every single time. The dinner exploded. Jessica was screaming at Brandon, demanding to know what other lies he'd told her. How deep did this go? Was everything built on fraud? Robert was on his phone, stepping into the hallway, his face gray. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Susan was crying at the head of the table. Her beautiful vow renewal dinner completely destroyed. Emily and Michael were trying to calm everyone down while simultaneously looking horrified by the revelation. Michael caught my eye and gave me the slightest nod, almost imperceptible, but I saw it. And Sarah? Sarah was staring at me like I was a complete stranger. You humiliated my family, she said quietly, her voice shaking with barely contained rage. Your brother humiliated me for years, I replied. Every holiday, every birthday, every family dinner, you let him. This entire family let him. Every single one of you just sat there and watched. That's not the same thing, Sarah said. Brandon was just joking around. He didn't mean anything by it. You just destroyed his marriage, his reputation, everything he's worked for. Everything he's worked for? I almost laughed. He's never worked for anything in his life. He married money and then stole more of it. That's not work, Sarah. That's crime. I looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw something I'd been refusing to see for 6 years. She wasn't upset because her brother was a fraud. She was upset because I'd exposed it. Because in her mind, protecting the family image was more important than protecting her husband's dignity. More important than the truth. More important than the retirees whose savings were being stolen. Apologize to Brandon, Sarah said, her voice rising now, her face flushed red. Apologize right now for making those accusations in front of everyone. They're not accusations, I said. They're facts. Documented facts. And I'm not apologizing for telling the truth. Then get out. Sarah's voice cracked like a whip. If you can't apologize to my brother, then get out of my house right now. The room went silent again. Everyone was staring at us, frozen in place like statues. Your house, I said quietly. The house we bought together? The house I've been paying the majority of the mortgage on for 6 years because your salary didn't quite cover your half. Our house, Sarah corrected herself. And I'm telling you to leave if you can't apologize. I looked around the table one more time. At Brandon, pale and sweating. At Jessica, mascara running down her face. At Robert, still on the phone in the hallway. At Susan, sobbing into her napkin. At all these people who'd watched Brandon tear me down for years and never said a single word. At the family that valued image over integrity. At my wife, who was choosing her brother over her husband, even now, even after everything that had just been revealed. I'll pack my things tomorrow, I said. My voice was calm, steady. You can have the house. I'll have my lawyer contact you about the divorce. Sarah's face went pale. Divorce? David, wait, I didn't mean. Yes, you did, I interrupted. You meant exactly what you said. You just didn't think I'd actually leave. You thought I'd apologize. You thought I'd cave, like I always do. But I'm done caving. I walked out of that house and didn't look back. Drove to a hotel downtown, checked into a room on the 4th floor, and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall for about 3 hours. Just staring. Not thinking, not feeling, just existing in the raw aftermath of what had just happened. My marriage was over. 8 years, gone in 20 minutes. Not because of some dramatic betrayal like cheating, but because I had finally stood up for myself. Because I had finally refused to apologize for being disrespected. The next morning, I went back to the house while Sarah was at her parents' place, probably being consoled and told I was the villain. I packed my clothes, my personal items, my important documents. I left everything else. The furniture we'd picked out. The decorations. The photos on the walls of vacations and holidays and happy moments that apparently meant nothing. I didn't want any of it. Each piece was a reminder of a life I'd been living wrong. I rented a small apartment across town that same week. Bare walls, basic furniture. Functional, impersonal. A place to sleep and eat and figure out what came next. It was exactly what I needed. The silence was strange at first. No one asking where I was going. No one making passive-aggressive comments about my work schedule. No one sighing dramatically when I mentioned anything about satellites or engineering specs. Just me, my thoughts, and the hum of the refrigerator. For the first time in years, I could breathe. The fallout from that dinner was nothing short of spectacular. Within a week, Jessica had filed for divorce from Brandon. Turns out the pension fund issue was even worse than I'd thought. Brandon hadn't just been getting sweetheart loans. He'd been actively siphoning money through a network of shell companies, hiding the trail behind layers of corporate paperwork that would have made an accountant's head spin. When the official investigation started, it uncovered years of systematic financial manipulation. Brandon's development company collapsed within a month. His father-in-law faced federal charges. The whole thing made the local news, then the regional, then it got picked up by national outlets. Because there's nothing the media loves more than a story about rich people being terrible. complete with mug shots showing Brandon looking nothing like the confident golden boy he'd always pretended to be. Just a scared middle-aged man in a bad situation he'd created entirely himself. But here's what really surprised me. About 2 weeks after I moved out, Michael, Emily's husband, called me out of nowhere. "David," he said, "I need to tell you something. I've been wanting to tell someone for years, but I was too afraid of what it would do to the family. Too afraid of being ostracized. Like what's happening to you now?" "What is it?" I asked. "Brandon's been doing this kind of thing for years. Not just the pension fund scheme. He's been manipulating everyone in this family his entire life, lying about his accomplishments, exaggerating his success, taking credit for other people's work, mocking anyone who wasn't impressed by him. I've watched him do it dozens of times. But every time I tried to say something to Emily, the family would close ranks around him. They'd tell me I was jealous, that I didn't understand how business really worked, that I should be supportive instead of critical." "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because you're the first person who ever actually stood up to him," Michael said. "And I wanted you to know that not everyone in this family thought you were the problem. Some of us saw exactly what was happening. We just weren't brave enough to do anything about it. I should have said something years ago. I'm sorry I didn't." That conversation stayed with me for weeks. It validated something I'd felt but couldn't prove. That I wasn't crazy. That what Brandon had been doing to me for years wasn't normal. That I wasn't being oversensitive or making a big deal out of nothing. Someone else had seen it. Someone else had noticed. And they'd been too afraid to say anything. It wasn't just about Brandon. It was about an entire family system that had enabled his behavior for decades, protected him, made excuses for him, attacked anyone who questioned him. And Sarah? She'd been raised right in the middle of that system. She'd learned from childhood that protecting the family image was more important than telling the truth. Some lessons run so deep people don't even know they've learned them. The divorce took 4 months to finalize. Sarah tried to get everything: the house, the savings, my retirement accounts. Her lawyer actually argued that I'd destroyed her family and owed her compensation for emotional damage. Like telling the truth about a criminal was somehow equivalent to abusing my spouse. But I had a good lawyer too, a really good one Michael had recommended. And more importantly, I had documentation of everything. 6 years of mortgage payments showing I'd paid significantly more than half. Bank statements proving I'd covered the lion's share of our bills while Sarah spent her discretionary income on clothes and trips. Records showing she'd invested thousands of our joint savings into her brother's company without telling me, money that was now gone. When everything was laid out in court, it became painfully clear that I'd been carrying the financial weight of our marriage for years, while Sarah and her family treated me like a convenient ATM who should be grateful for the privilege of being included. We split everything 50-50 in the end, which actually meant I walked away with more than half of what I'd originally contributed. The judge didn't buy the emotional abuse argument. Not even close. But I didn't care about winning or getting more. I just wanted it over. I wanted to close that chapter and never look back. The really interesting part came about 6 months after the divorce was finalized. I was at a grocery store on a Sunday afternoon, just picking up stuff for the week: chicken breasts, vegetables, rice, the basics. I was in the produce section examining avocados when I heard someone say my name. "David." I turned around and almost didn't recognize the woman standing there. Susan, Sarah's mother. She looked like she'd aged a decade in 6 months. Her hair was grayer, her face had new lines. She looked tired in a way that went bone deep. "Susan," I said. "How are you? Can we talk for a minute?" she asked quietly. I know I don't have any right to ask, but can we? We stood there, surrounded by people picking out apples and arguing about whether the tomatoes were ripe enough. And Susan told me something I'd never expected to hear. "You were right," she said. "About Brandon. About all of it. Robert and we knew something was wrong for years, decades really. We just didn't want to see it. We raised him to believe he was special, that rules didn't apply to him the same way they applied to other people, that he deserved success just because of who he was. And we let that belief destroy him. We let it destroy everything." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Because you deserved better, Susan said, her eyes welling up with tears. From all of us, from this family, but especially from Sarah. She was so scared of disappointing us, of not living up to what we expected, that she forgot how to be a partner to you. She forgot that marriage means choosing your spouse over everyone else. Even over your family, especially when your family is wrong. How is Sarah? I asked, surprising myself with the question. Alone, Susan said simply. She moved back in with us for a while after the divorce, but it didn't work. Too many memories in that house. Too much damage from everything that happened. She's living in a small apartment now, working long hours, not dating anyone. I think she's trying to figure out who she is without us telling her who to be. I felt a twinge of something. Not regret, exactly, but sadness for what could have been. If we'd both been different people. If she'd been willing to see me for who I really was instead of through her family's distorted lens. I hope she figures it out, I said. And I genuinely meant it. David, Susan said, as I started to turn back to my shopping cart. I know it doesn't mean anything now. I know it's too late. But I'm sorry for what Brandon did to you all those years. For what we all did by allowing it. For never once standing up and telling him to stop. You deserved a family that stood by you. And we failed you. Every single one of us. I nodded and walked away. Brandon's trial started 2 months ago. The pension fund investigation uncovered so much fraud that the federal prosecutors threw the book at him. Wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy charges, the whole menu. His lawyers tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutors weren't interested. Too many retirees had lost too much money. The judge denied bail, deeming Brandon a flight risk. So he's been sitting in a federal holding facility. Last I heard, he's looking at 12 to 15 years. The golden boy of the family, wearing an orange jumpsuit and eating cafeteria food. Turns out all that big talk about being a self-made man doesn't mean much when the feds start subpoenaing your shell company records. His father-in-law flipped on him almost immediately, taking a plea deal, 5 years in federal prison in exchange for testimony against Brandon. He's already serving his sentence. The country club membership his family had maintained for 3 generations? Revoked. The vacation homes? Seized as part of asset forfeiture. 60 years of old money prestige, gone in about 6 months. Jessica didn't waste any time either, filing for divorce within a week of the indictment. She took the kids and moved to Colorado, changed their last name back to her maiden name. Last I heard through the grapevine, she's working as a real estate agent herself now, legitimately this time. Starting over from scratch at 40 with 2 kids. Can't say I blame her for wanting to disappear. About 3 months after the divorce was finalized, my boss called me into his office. I figured it was about the Henderson satellite project. We'd been having some issues with the thermal management systems, and I'd been putting in extra hours. Instead, he slid a folder across the desk. Senior systems engineer, he said. 15% raise, your own team of 4, and first crack at the DoD contract we've been chasing for 2 years. I just stared at him. What changed? You did, he said. Last 6 months, you've been different. More confident. More willing to push back when something's wrong. More willing to take ownership. Whatever happened in your personal life, it's made you better at your job. So, I'm giving you more job to be better at. The raise bumped me to $161,000. Not Tesla paid in cash money, but real money, earned money. The encounter I'd been dreading happened about 8 months after the divorce. I was at this Italian place downtown with Laura. We'd been dating for about 3 months at that point. Good restaurant, quiet corner table, nice bottle of wine. We were talking about her students, about my new project, about maybe taking a trip to San Diego. And then I looked up, and Sarah was standing by the hostess stand. She saw me at the exact same moment, froze like a deer in headlights. She looked different, thinner, tired. The confident marketing executive who'd always been so put together now looked like she hadn't slept properly in months. She was alone. No date, no friends. Just her in a nice dress that seemed to hang a little looser than it should. For a second, I thought she might come over, cause a scene, try to talk. Instead, she just stared at me, then at Laura, then back at me. I gave her a small nod. Nothing more. She turned around and walked out of the restaurant. Laura watched the whole thing. "Ex-wife?" she asked. "Yep." "She looks miserable." "Yep." Laura reached across the table and took my hand. "Good." I laughed. Actually laughed. First time thinking about Sarah hadn't made my chest tight in almost a year. Michael called me again about a month ago. He and Emily had separated. Not because of anything dramatic, but because Emily couldn't let go of what had happened. She blamed me for destroying her family. Blamed Michael for not defending Brandon. Blamed everyone except the person actually responsible. "She keeps saying things would have gone back to normal if you just kept your mouth shut," Michael said. "Like the fraud would have just stopped on its own. Like those retirees would have magically gotten their money back. She can't accept that Brandon did this to himself." "How are you holding up?" I asked. "Better than I expected, honestly. I've been carrying this family's secrets for 8 years, watching Brandon get away with everything while the rest of us just smiled and nodded. It's exhausting pretending you don't see what's right in front of you." He paused. "You know what the worst part is? I think Emily knows the truth, deep down. She just can't admit it. Because that would mean admitting her whole family was built on lies." I knew exactly what he meant. Brandon's sentencing came through last week. Guilty on all counts. 14 years in federal prison, plus restitution payments that'll follow him for the rest of his life. The judge specifically mentioned his brazen contempt for working people's retirement savings during sentencing, calling it one of the most egregious cases of pension fraud she'd seen in 20 years on the bench. They showed his mugshot on the evening news. The guy who used to brag about paying cash for Teslas, now standing in front of a height chart in an orange jumpsuit with a booking number under his chin. The guy who called my career middling is now going to spend the next decade and a half learning what it's like when the government takes everything you have. I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel good watching that segment. Laura and I were eating dinner when it came on. She looked over at me and just raised her glass. "To karma," she said. "To karma." Robert called me the day after the sentencing. First time we'd spoken since the grocery store conversation with Susan. "I wanted you to hear it from me," he said. His voice sounded old, broken. "He's going to prison. My son is going to prison." I didn't know what to say, so I just waited. "You were right," Robert continued. "About everything. We raised him to think he was untouchable. We made excuses every time he cut corners. We told ourselves it was just ambition, just drive, just Brandon being Brandon." He laughed bitterly. "Funny how that phrase keeps coming back to haunt us." "I'm sorry it turned out this way," I said. And weirdly, I meant it. Not for Brandon. He earned every day of that sentence. But for Robert and Susan, who had to watch their son get led away in handcuffs because they'd spent 40 years enabling him. "David," Robert said, before hanging up, "for what it's worth, and I know it's not worth much, you were the best thing that ever happened to my daughter." She just couldn't see it. None of us could. Laura moved in with me 3 weeks ago. We found a bigger place, a 2-bedroom apartment with a view of the mountains and enough space for her books and my project equipment. Nothing fancy. Brandon would probably call it middling. But here's the thing about Laura. She actually gives a damn about what I do. Last Tuesday, I came home stressed about a design flaw we'd found in the thermal coupling system. Most people's eyes would glaze over after 10 seconds of that conversation. Laura sat with me for 2 hours, asking questions, helping me think through the problem, genuinely trying to understand. She even sketched out a potential solution on the back of a napkin that turned out to be pretty close to what we eventually implemented. "You know what I love about your job," she said that night. "You're literally putting things in space that help people communicate. That's so much cooler than whatever Brandon was doing, stealing from old people." "Exactly," I chuckled. "You build satellites. He built a prison sentence." I laughed so hard I nearly choked on my dinner. So, that's where we are. Brandon's in federal prison, starting a 14-year sentence. His father-in-law's right behind him. Jessica's rebuilding her life in Colorado. Emily and Michael are separated. Sarah's alone in a small apartment somewhere, probably still telling herself I'm the one who ruined everything. And me? I've got a promotion, a girlfriend who actually respects what I do, and an apartment that feels more like home than that house with Sarah ever did. My satellite components are still orbiting Earth, helping people communicate across continents, still doing the work that Brandon called middling while he was busy committing federal crimes. The other day, I got an email from my old engineering professor. "One of my former students is interning at your company," he wrote. "She said you're the reason she went into aerospace. Said you gave a talk at her high school career day 3 years ago, and it changed her life." I don't even remember that talk. But apparently, while I was busy feeling like a failure because some trust fund fraud kept telling me I wasn't good enough, I was out there inspiring the next generation of engineers. Funny how that works. This entire experience shattered my perception of loyalty, family, and self-worth. If you were in my shoes at that dinner table, watching years of disrespect unfold, what would you have done? Would you have kept the peace, or would you have dropped that bombshell? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'm really curious to hear what you all think.